Blog 4, Being Seen in Love. Welcome to Sitting With It, a space for reflection, emotional honesty and the thoughts we often carry quietly within ourselves. Here we take the time to explore identity, relationships, mental health, ADHD, sexuality and the complicated ways we learn to survive in the world around us. Not through perfect answers, not through performance, but by learning to sit with the things that we usually try to escape from. I'm Jock Spivvy, this is my lived experience, and this is Sitting With It. There's a moment before you enter certain rooms. You probably know it. The split second where your body scans everything before your mind catches up. Tone, mood, energy, who's there, who feels safe, who doesn't. In this blog episode, Being Seen in Love, I'm going to touch on the chameleon method, which I've kind of called it this. And this scanning that happens before your mind's got a chance to catch up, I call it simply that, the scan. It's one of the 4 S's. And I think I've been doing it most of my life. Long before I understood sexuality, long before I understood ADHD, long before I understood why I could never fully relax inside myself. I was scanning for safety. When I met him, something changed. At this point, I was 34, or at least it felt like it did. For the first time in my life, I felt emotionally seen by another man in a way that felt complete. I always felt seen by people in my past. Well, I didn't actually. I was never fully seen because I was always scanning and hiding. But I felt like I was seen before I had a reason to want to hide. And I felt like I was seen by a grandparent, and he was a very steady and consistent person who I felt connected to in a way that I never had before, that I've never had since. But when I changed my surroundings, for the first time in my life, I felt emotionally seen by another man in a way that felt complete. Not sexual validation, not experimentation, not fantasy. I was in love. It was real love. Or at least that's what I understood love to be at the time. And when you've spent most of your life emotionally starving, being emotionally fed feels overwhelming. It's like oxygen, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. I didn't just fall in love with him, I breathed him in. And that sounds dramatic, but it's true. Every part of me attached to what he represented. He represented freedom, acceptance, visibility, safety, a future I'd never allowed myself to picture properly before. And because I had hidden my sexuality for over 20 years, 25 years, what landed in that relationship wasn't just me in the present. It was decades of repression arriving all at once. 36 years of withheld love, withheld intimacy and withheld identity. Now, I'd been in relationships before, so it wasn't always withheld, and it wasn't intimacy, and it wasn't an identity. It wasn't withheld love. It was the passion. It was something different. It had a different texture to it in this event at this time. But all this was pouring into one person. And that, I admit, is a lot for one person to carry, to be filled with. And I carried him in the same way completely for who he was. But obviously I came with a lot more. The scan. I still scanned constantly, even inside love. That's the strange thing about hyper-vigilance and ADHD that I didn't know about then and that I'm learning about now. You can be held by someone and still feel unsafe internally. I watched for shifts constantly, changes in tone, distance, disappointment, silences, little things, tiny things, things other people probably wouldn't even notice. But when you've spent your life adapting to environments emotionally, your nervous system notices everything, especially when love feels like survival. And I think that's what this relationship became for me. It became survival. Not intentionally, not consciously, but emotionally. Because if this worked, then maybe all the years before it made sense. Maybe all the hiding had led to somewhere. Maybe I could finally stop scanning. But I didn't stop. All I'd done in my methodology of the chameleon method, in the 4 S's, I just changed the second S. I'd changed the suit. Like I just said, the chameleon method calls this the suit, the role we step into to belong. And my suit, after I met him, became the devoted partner, the understanding partner, the compromising partner, the man who could absorb discomfort to preserve the connection that I'd got. And at first, that looked like love. But compromise inside relationships is normal. Communication is normal. Working through fears together is normal. But slowly something changed, and I felt it changing. He wanted to progress quickly because that's where he was. That's what his map held. He wanted the house. He wanted the engagement. He wanted the wedding. He wanted to be a father. And every time a fear came up in me, I overrode it. I did speak it out loud, and I did articulate it, maybe not in the best of ways, but in the way that I had the tools to do it in. And not because the fears weren't real, but because losing the relationship felt more dangerous than losing myself within it. And that is something that is really difficult to admit, and it's taken me a lot of time of sitting with it and working through it to be able to talk about it in this way. Because from the outside, it sounds irrational, but emotionally, it made perfect sense to me at the time. I had finally been seen, or at least I believed that I had. And once you attach your identity to being seen by somebody else, you'll tolerate almost anything to avoid losing it. I remember telling one of my parents that we were going to live together, and we had plans for the future. And the response that I got was, "You're just playing at it." And that sentence entered the whole relationship like smoke, quietly but persistent, and impossible to fully remove once it had been said. Because even though my family had welcomed him, even though they attended celebrations, they listened to plans, they offered support, that sentence sat underneath everything. You're just playing at it. Like my love wasn't fully real. Like I wasn't fully real. And I think part of me spent years trying to prove otherwise, not just to my family, but to myself as well. So the third S, so I was wearing that suit, that's the second S. The scanning happens, then the suit, and then the static. This is where the static begins. The exhaustion of holding a role together while your nervous system quietly collapses underneath it. And ADHD makes that louder. But then I didn't know that. Because there's no silence internally, just analysis, looping, questioning, over-explaining, monitoring, trying to emotionally predict outcomes before they happen and putting solutions in place for them, having the arguments before they come along. Your brain is jumping from track to track to track within the static. Being inside my own head during that relationship was exhausting. Because outwardly, I was functioning. But internally, I was constantly negotiating with myself. Is this okay? Am I overreacting? Should I compromise more? Should I communicate differently? Am I the problem? And when you love somebody deeply, you'll often distort yourself trying to preserve the connection, especially if rejection feels unbearable. The relationship became emotionally consuming, not because the love wasn't real, but because I slowly stopped existing separately from it. Everything emotionally ran through him. My security ran through him. My future ran through him. My identity ran through him. My worth ran through him. And that is the dangerous part. Because when another person becomes the regulator for your entire emotional world, you hand them extraordinary power. I'm not saying he asked for it, and I'm not saying that I was consciously aware that I'd done that. But moving from one suit in a heterosexual world to what I believed was an authentic love, putting on another suit, that was his world. I never found mine. And I remember voicing concerns during the choice we made to become parents about having a child together, about security, about control, about bonding, about the pressure on the relationship. I'd gone through a difficult time with the separation from a marriage, navigating custody of children, divorce, financial separations. I'd gone through a lot, and I wasn't where he was, but we were running his journey. And I voiced concerns about all of it and my fears at the time. COVID hit, and it had intensified everything emotionally. The world already felt unstable, and internally I felt trapped between fear and responsibility. I said the only thing I could fully control was whether I pursued this journey and made it legally binding, and that was the only choice in all of it that I had. What followed, well, that statement that I made about what I could control exploded everything. And what followed wasn't just heartbreak, it was psychological erosion. And that's harder to explain because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, through confessions, through emotional dependency, through mixed messages, through hope. At one point, I was told I'd been used to get the baby handed over. I was told that I was a bad parent. That I wasn't wanted as a father to this child. That at best I could remain involved in this child's life that was now here, that I had spent almost 2 years planning a future for and dealing with my own battles about the bonding and what that meant to my future. To then be told, or to be given the generosity of somebody I believed I loved, as I can remain involved as a family friend. And even saying that out loud now seems surreal, because I heard all of those things and still stayed emotionally attached to that person. That's trauma. That's not weakness. Trauma. The inability to separate pain from love because your nervous system has fused them together. And the hardest part of me could already see it happening. I could feel myself disappearing. I could feel the imbalance. I could feel the control, the manipulation of the narrative, the emotional dependency, but I still kept returning emotionally because the drug wasn't just him. It was being seen. And he was seeing everything that I had in my arsenal, and I wasn't seeing anything other than the external display. I had no emotion. I had no internal compass. And after a lot of trauma, eventually, in the most complicated of ways, we both moved on. Quickly for some, not quickly for others, while still emotionally keeping threads connected to me. Enough hope to keep me. He moved on, and emotionally detached quickly. but still kept emotionally keeping threads connected to me. By that, I mean we continued to see each other after the official separation, and everybody believed we were over. And there was enough hope there to keep me psychologically attached, enough ambiguity to stop me fully grieving. And until one evening, it just ended completely. He'd moved into a new relationship, a new future and a new direction. And in all that time, we continued to keep in contact and have whatever relationship it was. I just had to kind of move through those moments. And I think in the world of the other person, I would say that was believed to be a kindness, a gradual separation, a gradual, dialing down the intensity of what was happening. And in fact, it felt, now on reflection, it felt like a punishment, a prolonged punishment for something perceived to have been, a punishment for me being or building an identity, a sense of self, for me following my own map. Like, I believe that was a long drawn out punishment. And anyway, the new direction, the new future he had, the new relationship, that was the moment something finally broke open in me, because I'd realised something devastating at this point. I'd handed another human being the power to emotionally destroy me because I believed love and being seen were the same thing. Then the final S, so the scanning, the suit, the scanning, the suit, the static, the final bit came, and it was the shedding. And it's the painful removal of that suit, not gracefully, not cleanly, but honestly. And shedding hurts, because you don't just lose the relationship, you lose the version of yourself that existed inside it, the future, the identity, the meaning, the illusion. But underneath all that grief, something else appeared. And that was me. Not the adapted version, not the compromising version, not the survival version, just me. And I think that's why I finally stopped speaking to him completely. I cut all ties. I had to do it. And it was not from hatred. It wasn't from revenge. But because I finally understood something. Love without self-abandonment has to include me too. I still believe what we had was real. That's the complicated part in all of this. The love was real, the intensity was real, and the connection was real. And so was the damage. Both of those things can exist together, and I've learned that. That's what sitting with it means. Not forcing things into heroes and villains, but sitting inside the contradiction long enough to see clearly. And I know that's a short snippet of a relationship and me moving through 4 S's in a reflective way of one relationship. On reflection of this episode, being seen in love, sometimes the thing that makes us feel most alive is also the thing asking us to disappear. And I'd like, if you're listening, for you to just take a minute and sit with that. Sometimes the thing that makes us feel most alive is also the thing asking us to disappear. What relationship taught you the difference between being loved and abandoning yourself to keep love? That can be a relationship in a parent-child relationship, a carer or a child, a sibling. That could be a romantic relationship. That can be a friendship. What in the relationship, whichever relationship it was, taught you the difference between being loved and abandoning yourself to keep love? sometimes you do have to make compromise, and sometimes you do have to make sacrifices, and that is normal, the normal dynamic in any relationship. But abandoning yourself to keep love will never work. So I've touched on the chameleon method and the 4 S's in this episode, which I haven't done before. It's something that is kind of shaping the podcast as we're going along and as I'm recording. This is the 3rd recorded podcast, and I hope people that have listened or to previous ones and are listening to this one find that it's growing, it's developing, and myself as a podcaster is growing and developing. I am working on the book at the moment, and the book will be, I don't know how long until it's released, but that will be more in depth than the podcast. So yeah, the We Don't Evolve, We Are Chameleons is the title of the book that's being written, and that is my lived experience from day 1 to now. That is something I am working on day and night, and I am enjoying writing, and I'm enjoying sort of incorporating the Sitting With It podcast into all of that. I'm just going to sign off. So thank you for listening or reading and sitting with the reflection and listening to Being Seen in Love. If this resonated with you, you can explore more thoughts like this through the podcast, Sitting With It. It's always a space for honest conversations about identity, ADHD, emotional well-being, and excuse me, slight lag there in the tech. I was saying it's a space for honest conversations about identity, ADHD, emotional well-being, relationships, LGBTQI plus life, and the many ways we adapt to survive. I thought I'd got through this podcast then without any kind of hiccups, but no. So maybe episode number 5 or blog number 5 will be a seamless podcast recording. You can always follow along on my social media, which they are growing and developing too as I spend more time on them. Just search at Sitting With It Pod. Visit www.sittingwithitpod.com. The website is up and down at the moment because it's still being built. Or you can always email me with anything that resonates or anything you might want to discuss or maybe for me to touch upon in a podcast. And the email address is sittingwithitpod@gmail.com. And if this reflection made you pause, think, or recognise something inside yourself, maybe even share it with someone else who might need that moment too. Until next time, just remember that safety doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from accepting yourself. Take a breath and sit with it.